It's hard. Very difficult. What are we talking about?
No, they can't say nothing this time.
We're now reconvening an open work session for the May 17th Wicomico County Council work session. First item on the agenda is the poultry houses, and I know we have Mr. Jack Lennox here. How are you? Mr. Lennox, good to see you. For the audience, what you'll see, the map that we have here is the same map that's over there. We have one for the audience as well as for the council here. And those are zoning maps. Normally what we've been following throughout the process has been land use maps. And we felt with Jack's recommendation at the last work session that if we maybe began looking at this from the aspect of true zoning and following zoning guidelines, it would be more specific, more exact, and we would have a much more succinct solution to this this issue.
Mr. President, question. Is the map on the easel for Mr. Lennox to refer to when talking with the council, or is it for the public, or is it for the TV? Because if that could be tilted a little bit and get picked up by that camera,
Good point.
The whole map should be
Yes, because we have ours on the table here as well.
Pack 14 and the audience here in the room. Will that work for you, Jack?
Yes, sir. That's fine.
Keith, do you have that?
Yeah, he has it.
Come in more? Can you come in further?
Actually,
do this off a camera one, so.
Can you come in further?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Good morning, Mr. Lennox. How are you?
good morning, Mr. Cannon. Would you like me to do a bit of a retrospective and then
Please.
an explanation of some materials today? It is my intent this morning to bring to you very little new information, but a follow-up from our last meeting, and we like to think that each of the work sessions has productively grown from the previous one, and that is hopefully the case today as well. You were provided 3 documents. One is the updated legislation, which Ms. Harris made amendments to based on your previous discussion. So there has been obviously a lot of community discussion since then, and some good ideas of various kinds raised. We are very careful on staff side not to make any additions or changes that did not reflect the previous council discussion. So you have an amended legislative form, and I'll get into those changes a little bit.
Okay.
As part of that, as you referenced, Mr. Cannon, there's a reference for the first time strictly to zoning standards and zoning districts, and so you have a revised map that's been provided that does take some editorial privilege with the zoning code, because we've summarized some districts to try to reflect your last discussion, and I'll go into those as well. The third document is an attachment that you are now seeing for the first time, as included in your packet, with a supplement that I distributed today, which has to do with poultry house standards. There's 2 categories in there, and one had to do with road access, and I know we want to get into that discussion a little bit. And Mr. Young is with us today and prepared to address any questions as well as raise perhaps some suggestions. And then the details on the vegetative buffer. This is all something that you've discussed before, and one of the issues that has been sort of hanging out there had to do with specific standards for plantings. And so the only additions that were included in the handout at your place today had to do with the size of plant material, and that shows both with the buffer around the active areas of the poultry operation, as well as the details on the plantings of grasses at exhaust fans. So that is the only addition today to what you received with the mail out last week. As part of the discussion on the zoning, when last we met, we got away from the discussion, sort of the broad reference to designated growth areas, as we realized that the county is 400 square miles, so that there are areas of it that are distinctly different in character, and the broad reference to designated growth, as opposed to your references to A1 agriculture, needed a little bit of refinement. So the map in front of you combines all of your residential districts, residential zoning districts, and that shows in yellow. We know that the reference on zoning map, and this, by the way, there's a handout at your spot, which is the exact map that's in your online version, and is the same maps that are facing both the public and those viewing at home. So there are no changes on those maps. But the ones been put together have essentially said, what shows as just the white, lack of color area of the county is, and the mapping is A1. You start to see yellow, which is the summary of what you term in your zoning and your planning as residential districts. And then it leaves that sort of teal green color. And we'd like to talk about that a little bit more as well. When we discussed this the last time, you asked us to present a map that would show what it would look like if you had poultry houses by special exception in the residential districts. And that is what this does. That's the yellow area. The green areas represent two categories. One called town transitional, which is a growth area that's around each of the cities and towns. But it also includes something that we did not discuss really at all last time, and that is whether or not your approach to allowing poultry houses by right in the town transition, whether you wanted that to also apply to village conservation. Village conservation, very simply, are your unincorporated rural villages, and that would go anything from, as you can see mapped out there, Quantico, Parsonsburg, Whitehaven, the three out on the west side, Bival, Tyaskin, Nanacoke, Powellville on the east, Allen. And so what we did not discuss last time is whether there is a distinction between town transitional and the village conservation in your mind, and so I'll leave that question for a moment. The reference to zoning then would have A1 allowed inherently, subject to all of the buffers and setbacks that you have previously discussed. Residential districts, special exception, subject to all of the buffers, setbacks that you discussed previously. There remains in there the provision to modify, whether you're in, no matter what zone you're in, those setbacks and separations by special exception in public hearing, Board of Appeals. That's the same process you had previously. The attachment that references the roads, the standards, we've gotten away a little bit from the details. The only detail we had, frankly, was 50 to 60 feet on a road opening. And what we found out, and Mr. Young again can get into that in greater detail if you like, the openings that we're requiring are much wider than that. And so by not referencing that, it was to try to head off someone submitting a plan saying, well, I met your minimum. So it is less defined than it was previously, but again, we can add any specifications that you folks might agree on. Those specifications would address as well site distance, construction standards, and all of those are meant to be in the hands at this point of a review with Public Works. And then the vegetative buffer, the 3 staggered rows, with the timing, with the performance, guarantee that, requirement that they maintain. And we have some additional planting requirements, and those came from Mr. Passwater's having experience with poultry house plantings. I'll stop at that point, Mr. Chairman, and turn to any questions that you may like.
So the plant material is suggested 1 gallon stock or approximately 18 inches.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then the details on the grasses as well, which we're now requiring. That's in a lot more detail than we've gotten into before, which is the plantings at all of the exhaust fan locations.
Jack, how difficult is it to change zoning? Let's say someone wants to change their, agricultural land into residential. What's the process for that?
In the state of Maryland, you have something called change or mistake, and you must demonstrate through the public process, initiating with the Planning Commission, through a public hearing, a recommendation to the council to change, obviously following a public hearing at legislation. And you must document change or mistake. That means that the designation at the start was wrong, was an oversight, for example, or that there's been a significant change in the area. And that's state of Maryland criteria. That's left at local discretion, however. It's more, too, how it ties back to your comprehensive plan. And if the comprehensive plan is clear, then you would, what we encourage folks to do when they come in and they say, and this happens from time to time, I want to change my zoning. And I go back and say, well, in this case, you have to start with a comp plan. And so sometimes you start with a comprehensive plan amendment and then do the zoning. Because you wouldn't consciously do zoning that's absolutely contrary to the comp plan. It can be done. If it's a major change in the goals and objectives of the county, you start with a comp plan.
Under setbacks, where on 2C, it states the same setbacks specified in subsections A and B shall apply in reverse to adjacent development.
Yes, sir.
What's adjacent, when you refer to adjacent development? What's that
Sure.
terminology?
That was an attempt, and perhaps if you see a way to more explicitly define that, that was your direction that those who are developing on property that is adjacent to a poultry house complex, that they would have to respect those additional setbacks.
Development referencing a proposed development, an actual building? Or?
In any of those things that prompt your additional separation. So if you look at your own list of what had been termed, I believe, we were at 400 feet, for example. The schools, daycare, mobile home parks, churches.
Okay.
It wouldn't be a shed or an outbuilding.
Okay.
Jack, I'd like to see us put a minimum on the driveways. I think that,
Certainly.
as the rest of the council, 50-foot, 60-foot minimum. And I guess if that didn't work for me, they could go to a special exception, correct?
If they wanted to go to less than that,
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
sure.
The rest of the council would agree with that.
I have a concern about that, Joe. I think the reason that it said 50 to 60% was or 50 to 60 feet was because of the turning radius of tractor-trailer trucks.
That's what I want to do.
Right.
He's
But-
saying minimum.
But the minimum, if 50 feet, why don't you make the minimum 60 feet?
Well, we can do that.
And if zoning, or planning and zoning, or roads already has a setback that's greater than that, is that what you're saying?
Can I invite Mr. Young? Because I
Certainly,
know
yes,
he's
please.
very
Thank
conversant
you.
on this.
I just think it'd be better defined.
Good morning.
If we put a minimum in, 60 would be fine.
Good morning, Wesley.
Hey, so the way we would handle it when we look at development plans, we have these transparent sheets that show the turning radiuses of different vehicles. We could easily take an 18-wheeler, and in this case, it's for a 1 inch equals 30-foot scale, and I can hand this around if brought a few different ones. You can lay these right over the plans to see if the driveway is sufficient.
Excuse us a minute.
Yeah, no
You
worries.
messed my computer up. I don't either. Laura? He did it.
Is that a 600 scale?
I guess, yeah. Okay.
So Wes, can you, the largest truck that we would have what turning radius?
So what we would want to do is look at for the land use itself. So the largest truck that would frequent a poultry facility would be a tractor trailer. And we would want to make sure that it could handle the turning radius of said tractor trailer safely. In some cases, if the driveway is too narrow or the road that they are turning onto or from is too narrow, you can have safety issues because they swing too far out. These templates that I've shared, and I will need them back because I borrowed them from, I don't want to get in trouble. These templates are an easy way of setting them on a set of plans and seeing that, okay, for this particular vehicle type, it can make the turn safely. Things to consider, I mentioned the driveway width. It's a good idea to have a minimum. 60 feet would be sufficient, I would think. However, if the road they're turning onto is sufficiently wide, they could go with a narrower driveway. I'm hesitant about putting driveways in a box because it all depends. Many of our rural tar and chip roads are maybe 18 feet wide. So you would need a much larger or a much wider driveway to safely turn onto that road. Now, again, you don't have as much traffic on there, so you could go into the passing lane. Thank you. But for safety purposes, ideally, these vehicles could turn to and from the site without cutting into the opposing lane. So from a public works standpoint, if the driveway, if the construction plans can adequately show they can handle the 18-wheeler ingress and egress, then we would be sufficient with whatever that driveway width was.
But we think we need to put in a 60-foot minimum. Yeah. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, a minimum would not hurt.
And it's
Really,
subject to special exception if there's a.
yes.
Right.
Reason.
And a part of it is, yeah, how wide is the road they're turning on? Is there a shoulder and so forth?
It's fine. 60 feet's fine.
If you can incorporate that, Jack, that would be great. Anything else that anyone's interested in seeing
Yeah, I'm okay with the rest of it.
with the proposed bill itself?
Is this the bill and the standards document? I mean, we're gonna do both? Now, I guess for the process, I know the legislation goes through planning and zoning. The standards document, does that, or is that?
I think it's a good idea because it's referenced.
Okay.
And that way, the rest of the commission members who have not been as intimately involved with this would see what we're expecting.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody? Jack, if you could fine tune all the specifics and I guess of the bill itself, including the 60-foot, and just get that back to us, as you've been doing,
Sure. Mr. Cannon, is something addition to this, including the 60 feet? Was there a change?
That's really about it. I think
Okay.
we're there.
Good.
Everybody's okay with the map?
Yes.
Can I ask you that question again, just to try to head this off? Do you look at the town transition areas the same way you do the villages?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Does it make a difference if we do
Well,
or don't? or-
You're making them inherently permitted in areas where you have concentrations of residents right now. In certain villages.
Well,
Oh, no, you can do it by zoning district. If you wanted to just do it in town transition and make it special exception in the villages, you know,
But I'm
Quantic,
saying you can't separate it just because there's a residence there is what I'm saying.
no, you would have to distinguish between town transitional or village conservation, so that you would,
Yeah.
right, so if you're in, say, Quantico or Whitehaven, interestingly, they're also governed by historic district controls, but that may cover you there.
Okay.
Well, I mean, some of these, especially on the western side of the county, I mean, there's a lot of critical area where there's already some sort of, I mean, it's already more difficult to build
That's true.
these things, and there's already 1,000 feet and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's, Whitehaven, I think pretty much all that's almost underwater right now. I mean, it's, that's definitely critical
Sure.
area, and Tyaskin, Bivalve, Nanacoke. I'm not sure about Allen, but, I mean, if you're in a critical area, there's state law prohibits, I mean, it's a complicated kind of thing, isn't it? The 1,000 feet and 900 and things like
And
that.
it gets
So,
down a lot coverage if you're in impervious surface, if you're in
Yeah.
a critical area.
Yeah, so.
That's fine. I just didn't want to leave that issue hanging because the last time I spoke of it as if it was entirely town transitional. But now that you see that there is a difference, but that difference is not significant, then we just go with it the way it's written.
That's fine. Okay.
Fine.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah. I mean, could we get this sent to planning and zoning and get this moving?
Send it to us, email, and then.
The only change is 60
The only
feet.
change is 60. So I would say by consensus, council, is everyone okay with this bill and the poultry standards?
Yeah, let planning and zoning take a crack at it, and then it'll be back to us.
Okay, all right. We in consensus? Everybody? Okay. As long as if you could do that, that would be
Absolutely.
great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Cannon,
Yes, sir.
now that the draft legislation is being sent to the planning commission, I think Mrs. Harris will agree with me that it would become a public document at that time. So would it be appropriate to have this draft posted on the website for the public to see, as well as the map?
Sure.
Thank you.
And the standards as well.
All marked draft?
Yes.
Yeah, the draft, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. All right, the comprehensive plan has been canceled for the day, as Mr. Kramer pointed. What we'll do now, I'd entertain a motion for a recess. We're going to have lunch, and then we will reconvene at 1 o'clock with the Board of Education.
You have a motion?
Second? All those in favor?
Could we do closed work session? Let's do that between 12 and 12:30. We're gonna do an hour for lunch.
Let's do lunch in 12, we can come back early.
12:30?
We'll come back
Okay.
early.